You know, so many people really don't know that HOA fines are more than just a pesky thing. They can actually lead to the loss of your home. So that's why our 9 News legal analyst Whitney Traylor is here with us to explain. We've been talking about this more and more lately. So how can an HOA ultimately cost you your home? Is it legal?
It doesn't seem like it should be, but the reality is it is, and it's primarily because of the filing documents. So when the HOA is created, they actually file their covenants and declarations. Well, that is sort of a pre-existing lien. So then when the properties are sold at a later date, they're subject to that document being first in place. So what happens is they get a small fine for a spot of oil on the driveway or a brown patch. Right, and the people will ultimately repair it. But in the meantime, there was penalties, interest. They then accumulate, and they weren't giving these people great notice. And so they started the foreclosure procedure because the fees and everything else amounted to the thousands of dollars.
Is that every HOA? Is this a standard HOA, or some are more punitive than others?
This appears, well, the question is when they have the penalties and the damages, do they foreclose? So there's one in particular, the Green Valley Ranch HOA, that's foreclosed. Over half of the foreclosures, HOA foreclosures in Denver, were from this one entity. So a lot of them know they're not punitive, they'll enforce their rules, but they won't go as far as foreclosing.
It just doesn't feel like this is why HOAs were set up to begin with, but we know the state ledge passed some bills this session regarding HOAs. What kind of an impact will that have on homeowners, or how will it play out?
Right, and you raise a good point. There's a lot of people who say, I want an HOA. I want consistency across my neighborhood. I don't want a bunch of junk out in people's yards. But here we have these real extreme situations that are becoming more common. So the legislature passed a couple of bills last year that went into effect in September, and those required more transparency. When they were foreclosing, they had to list all the various expenses. We haven't seen that litigation because it just was passed. So any case now, we're going to see that coming up this year.
Well, you've been doing some digging into that Green Valley Ranch situation. Tell us some of what you found out and how this does or doesn't make sense.
Well, what doesn't make sense to me, one of the big issues, is the amount of notice, right? In our country, we have due process. Before your life, liberty, or property can be taken, you're entitled to certain processes, including a foreclosure process. But here, they would get a fine, they take care of the issue, and then they hadn't paid the actual fine. That continues to build up, and they're saying we didn't get proper notice, there was no certified mail, and then the next correspondence is this, they're being served a document. So that's the issue, is how much notice they're being given.
It feels like we're seeing kind of what we saw in 2007, 2008, increasing numbers of evictions, foreclosures, and everything. What can people do if they're in that spot? I mean, it's got to be a scary situation.
That's a great point. And that 2008, a lot of people are mentioning because, as I said, there are these unusual foreclosures. So folks can definitely read their documents, whether you're in a lease, if you're renting or you own it, start with the HOA documents or your lease. Second thing is go to the board meetings, because nobody participates. I mean, the number of people who participate is nominal. So you can actually get voted on the board. And then the third thing, of course, there's a lot of services out there, legal aid. There's more and more nonprofits designed to help people in these situations.
Well, the HOA is certainly meant or designed to help, but in this case, it's maybe working at a very different direction. More to come on this as well. Thanks, Whitney. Sure. Always good to see you.
Yeah, good to be here.